The doctor holds test results, his expression grim. Your 7-year-old daughter hasn't eaten in 5 days, he tells the father. But this malnutrition? It's been months. The man's world shatters in an instant. Before we dive in, comment where in the world you are watching from and don't forget to click subscribe. The gymnasium smelled of floor polish and the lingering scent of hundreds of children packed together on a Tuesday morning. Rows of students sat cross-legged on the polished wood floor, their voices creating a low hum of chatter that echoed off the high ceilings. Principal Morrison stood at the podium, adjusting the microphone as teachers moved along the perimeter, gently shushing the more energetic groups. It was just another ordinary morning assembly at Riverside Elementary School, or so everyone thought. 7-year-old Sophia Chen sat in the third row with her second-grade class, her small frame nearly swallowed by the oversized navy blue cardigan she wore despite the warmth of the crowded space. Her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, noticed how still Sophia was compared to the other children. No fidgeting, no whispering to the girl beside her, no curious glances around the room. Just an eerie stillness that made Mrs. Patterson's experienced teacher instincts prickle with concern. "Good morning, Riverside Raiders," Principal Morrison's voice boomed through the microphone, and the students responded with an enthusiastic chorus. All except Sophia, whose lips barely moved. Mrs. Patterson took a step closer to her class, her eyes fixed on the little girl whose face had taken on a grayish pallor that stood out even in the fluorescent lighting. As Principal Morrison began discussing the upcoming fall festival, Sophia swayed slightly. The movement was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Mrs. Patterson saw it. She saw how Sophia's hands pressed against the floor as if to steady herself, how her head dipped forward just a fraction before she caught herself. The teacher began moving toward her, weaving between the seated rows of children. "We'll be having a pumpkin decorating contest," Principal Morrison continued, "and I encourage all students to participate." The words seemed to come from very far away to Sophia, muffled and distorted as if she were underwater. The edges of her vision had started to blur, the bright overhead lights creating halos that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. She tried to focus on the principal's face, but it kept swimming in and out of clarity. The last thing Sophia registered was Mrs. Patterson's voice saying her name with sudden urgency. Then the gymnasium tilted sideways, the ceiling and floor switching places in a dizzying spiral. Her small body crumpled, folding in on itself as consciousness slipped away. The thud of her hitting the floor was softened by the sweater she wore, but it was loud enough to silence the immediate area around her. "Sophia!" Mrs. Patterson was at her side in seconds, her knees hitting the hard floor as she reached for the child. "Someone call Nurse Fletcher. Now!" The teacher's voice cut through the assembly like a knife, sharp with alarm that years of professional composure couldn't quite hide. Around them, children began to murmur and crane their necks to see what was happening. Teachers moved quickly to maintain order, ushering students back, creating a circle of space around the unconscious girl. Principal Morrison abandoned the podium, his usually commanding presence replaced by visible concern as he hurried across the gymnasium floor. "Everyone remain calm," he announced, though his own voice had lost its usual steadiness. "Teachers, please take your classes back to your rooms in an orderly fashion." Within 90 seconds, Nurse Sarah Fletcher arrived, her medical bag clutched in one hand as she knelt beside Sophia. At 42, Sarah had been a school nurse for 15 years, and she'd seen her share of fainting students. Heat exhaustion, anxiety, the occasional undiagnosed medical condition. But as her trained eyes took in Sophia's appearance, something cold settled in the pit of her stomach. This was different. Sophia's skin was not just pale, it was almost translucent, with a grayish undertone that spoke of more than simple dehydration. Her lips had a faint bluish tint, and when Sarah gently lifted one of the girl's eyelids, checking her pupils, she could see the faint tracery of blood vessels that suggested extreme fatigue or malnutrition. The child's cheekbones were too prominent, her collarbones jutting sharply beneath the oversized sweater. "How long has she been like this?" Sarah asked Mrs. Patterson, her fingers finding Sophia's pulse. It was there, but weak and thready, faster than it should be. "She's been very quiet the past few days," Mrs. Patterson said, her voice tight with guilt. "I noticed yesterday she barely touched her lunch. I should have." I should have checked in with her more carefully. The teacher's hands twisted together, a gesture Sarah recognized as the self-recrimination all good teachers felt when they missed something important about one of their students. When did she last seem normal to you? Sarah asked, pulling out her blood pressure cuff and wrapping it around Sophia's thin arm. The numbers that appeared made her frown deeply. Too low, dangerously so for a child this age. Maybe Thursday or Friday last week? Mrs. Patterson tried to remember. She's always been a quiet child, but lately she's been even more withdrawn. No energy during recess. Falls asleep during reading time. Sarah nodded, filing away each piece of information as she continued her assessment. Sophia's breathing was shallow but regular. Her skin felt cool and slightly clammy. When Sarah carefully pressed on the girl's fingernail, watching for the pink color to return as a test of circulation, it took longer than it should have. Much longer. We need to wake her up, Sarah said, her voice calm, but carrying an underlying urgency that made Mrs. Patterson's stomach clench. Sophia. Sweetie, can you hear me? Sarah rubbed her knuckles gently against the girl's sternum, a technique designed to rouse someone from unconsciousness without causing harm. Sophia, I need you to open your eyes for me. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 20 seconds, Sophia's eyelids fluttered. A small sound escaped her lips, something between a whimper and a sigh. Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused and confused, darting around as if she didn't recognize where she was or how she'd gotten there. It's okay, honey. You're safe, Sarah said, keeping her voice steady and reassuring even as her mind raced through possible diagnoses. You fainted during assembly. I'm Nurse Fletcher. Do you remember me? Sophia's gaze finally settled on Sarah's face, and she gave the smallest of nods. Her lips moved as if to speak, but no sound came out. Don't try to talk just yet, Sarah said. I'm going to help you sit up very slowly. Mrs. Patterson is going to help support your back. Together, the two adults carefully maneuvered Sophia into a sitting position, propping her against the wall. The girl's head lolled slightly to one side before she seemed to gather enough strength to hold it upright. Sophia, Sarah began, watching the child's face carefully. When was the last time you ate something? Do you remember having breakfast this morning? The question seemed simple enough, but Sophia's reaction was telling. Her eyes widened slightly, a flash of something, fear, guilt, crossing her young face before she looked down at her hands. I wasn't hungry, she whispered, her voice barely audible. What about yesterday? Did you eat dinner last night? Sarah pressed gently, already suspecting she knew the answer but needing to hear it confirmed. Sophia shook her head, a tiny movement that made Sarah's heart sink. Lunch yesterday? Another shake of the head. Sophia, this is very important. I need you to think carefully. When was the last time you ate a full meal? Sarah kept her voice gentle but firm, the tone she'd perfected over years of coaxing truth from children who were scared, or embarrassed, or trying to protect someone. Sophia's small hands twisted in the fabric of her cardigan. Her voice, when it came, was so quiet that Sarah had to lean in to hear it. Thursday. I had lunch at school on Thursday. The words hung in the air between them, their implication devastating. Today was Tuesday. 5 days. This child hadn't eaten in 5 days. Sarah felt the professional mask slip for just a moment, shock and horror flickering across her face before she schooled her expression back to calm concern. But inside, her mind was reeling. 5 days without food for a 7-year-old child. The potential for organ damage, the immediate danger she was in, the implications of why a child would go so long without eating. Mrs. Patterson, Sarah said, her voice low and controlled. I need you to go to my office and call 911. Tell them we have a 7-year-old female with signs of severe malnutrition and possible neglect. She needs immediate transport to County General. She paused, making eye contact with the teacher to ensure her next words were understood clearly. Tell them it's an emergency. And after you make that call, I need you to pull Sophia's file. I need to know who her parents are and how to contact them immediately. Mrs. Patterson's face had gone white, but she nodded and stood quickly, her shoes squeaking on the gymnasium floor as she hurried toward the exit. Principal Morrison, who had been standing a respectful distance away, stepped closer. "Nurse Fletcher, is there anything I can do?" "Yes," Sarah said, not taking her eyes off Sophia. "I need a blanket and some juice or something with sugar. Glucose would be ideal, but apple juice will do if that's all we have. And I need you to contact the superintendent. This is going to be a CPS situation, Child Protective Services. The words that every educator hoped they'd never have to use, but knew were sometimes necessary." Principal Morrison nodded grimly and left to fulfill her requests. His earlier jovial demeanor completely vanished. Sarah turned her full attention back to Sophia, who was watching her with wide, frightened eyes. "Sweetie, I know you must be feeling very scared right now, but I need you to stay with me, okay? Can you do that? Just stay awake and talk to me. Am I in trouble?" Sophia's voice cracked on the words, and tears began to slide down her pale cheeks. "I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to faint. I tried to be good." The words sent a chill through Sarah that had nothing to do with the temperature in the gymnasium. "No, honey. You're not in trouble. Not at all. You didn't do anything wrong." She reached out and gently took one of Sophia's small hands in hers. It was cold, the fingers thin and fragile feeling. "But I need to ask you some questions, and I need you to be honest with me. Can you do that?" Sophia nodded, though her tears continued to fall. "Where do you live, Sophia? Who takes care of you at home?" "I live with my dad," Sophia said, "in the apartment on Maple Street, since Mommy went away." "When did your mommy go away?" "Last summer. Daddy said she had to go somewhere for a while, but she'd come back." Sophia's voice held that particular quality of a child trying to convince herself of something she wasn't entirely sure was true. "And it's just you and your dad at home?" "Yes, and sometimes Daddy's friend Marcus comes over." Sarah filed that information away. "Sophia, why haven't you eaten? Did something happen to the food at your house?" The little girl's face crumpled, and fresh tears spilled over. "Daddy forgot to go shopping," she whispered. "He's been working a lot. He leaves early and comes home late, and he forgets things sometimes. I tried to tell him we needed food, but he was tired and said he'd do it later, and then he forgot again." Each word was like a small blade to Sarah's heart. A child, 7 years old, going hungry because the adult responsible for her care was neglecting basic needs. Whether it was intentional or not didn't matter right now. What mattered was that Sophia was in immediate danger. "What about breakfast at school? Don't you get breakfast here?" "I'm not supposed to," Sophia said. "I'm not on the free lunch program. Daddy says we don't need help from anyone. I tried to ask Mrs. Patterson for some crackers once, but I was scared she'd tell Daddy and he'd get mad. He doesn't like it when I tell people our business." The picture was becoming clearer, and it made Sarah's chest tight with anger and sorrow. A parent who was either overwhelmed or neglectful, possibly both. A child too scared to ask for help. A system that had failed to notice until the child literally collapsed from hunger. Principal Morrison returned with a blanket and a small carton of apple juice. Sarah wrapped the blanket around Sophia's shoulders and opened the juice. "I need you to sip this very slowly," she instructed. "Your stomach hasn't had food in a while, so we have to be careful. Just tiny sips." Sophia took the juice box with trembling hands and did as she was told. Sarah watched as the first bit of liquid went down, saw the girl's whole body seem to lean into it, desperate for sustenance. It took everything in Sarah's professional training not to let Sophia gulp it down. Refeeding syndrome was a real danger when someone who'd been starved suddenly had access to food or drink. Too much too fast could actually cause more harm. The sound of sirens in the distance made Sophia's eyes widen with fear. "Is that for me?" "Yes, honey. We're going to take you to the hospital so the doctors can make sure you're okay. They're going to help you feel better. Will Daddy be there?" There was something in Sophia's voice, a mix of hope and fear that told Sarah volumes about the complicated relationship this child had with her father. "We're going to call him and let him know what's happening," Sarah said, which was true, though she suspected the conversation with Sophia's father was going to be anything but simple. Right now, I need you to focus on staying awake and taking little sips of that juice. Mrs. Patterson returned, slightly out of breath, carrying a manila folder. Ambulance is on the way. 2 minutes out, she handed the folder to Sarah. This is Sophia's file. Sarah flipped it open, scanning quickly. Emergency contact. Michael Chen. Father. Work number listed. No mother's contact information, which confirmed what Sophia had said. There was a note from last year's teacher about Sophia being shy and withdrawn. Recommendation for social skills support. Another note about attendance. How Sophia had missed several days in the spring without excuse notes. Red flags that, in hindsight, painted a concerning picture. Why hadn't anyone connected these dots sooner? The ambulance arrived with practiced efficiency. 2 paramedics, a man and a woman, entered the gymnasium with their equipment. Sarah briefed them quickly and professionally, though she could hear the slight tremor in her own voice as she reported the findings. 7-year-old female, 5 days without food, hypotensive, signs of dehydration and malnutrition. Conscious and alert now, but was unconscious for approximately 30 seconds. Blood pressure 90/55, pulse 110. The female paramedic, whose name tag read Rodriguez, knelt beside Sophia with a kind smile. Hey there, sweetheart. My name is Maria. My partner Jake and I are going to take you for a ride in our ambulance. Have you ever been in an ambulance before? Sophia shook her head, eyes wide. Well, it's pretty cool. We have all sorts of neat equipment. But first, we need to check a few things, okay? Maria began her assessment, double-checking vitals, looking into Sophia's eyes with a pen light, asking gentle questions. Jake set up a portable gurney, adjusting it to its lowest setting so Sophia wouldn't have far to move. Nurse Fletcher, Maria said after a moment, her voice low enough that Sophia wouldn't easily hear. You called this in as possible neglect? Sarah nodded. 5 days without food. Father apparently working long hours and forgetting to provide meals. Child was too scared to ask for help. Maria's jaw tightened, and she exchanged a look with Jake that spoke of cases they'd seen before. Children who'd slipped through cracks in the system. County General will have a social worker meet us. We'll document everything. They transferred Sophia to the gurney with gentle efficiency, Maria maintaining a steady stream of reassuring commentary. There we go, nice and easy. You're doing great, Sophia. We're going to take good care of you. As they prepared to wheel her out, Sophia reached out suddenly, grabbing Sarah's hand. Will you come with me? Please. The desperation in her voice broke something in Sarah's chest. Sarah looked at Principal Morrison, who nodded immediately. Go. We'll handle things here. I'll meet you there, Sarah promised Sophia, squeezing her hand. I need to make a phone call first, but I'll be right behind the ambulance. I promise. The gymnasium doors swung open, and morning sunlight streamed in as the paramedics wheeled Sophia out. Other students, who'd been kept in their classrooms, pressed their faces against windows to watch the ambulance in the parking lot. Teachers would have a difficult time today, helping children process what they'd witnessed, answering questions about why Sophia had fainted, maintaining some sense of normalcy. But Sarah's mind was already racing ahead to the next steps. She pulled out her phone and dialed the number listed for Michael Chen. It rang once, twice, 3 times, then went to voicemail. Mr. Chen, this is Nurse Sarah Fletcher from Riverside Elementary. Your daughter Sophia has been taken by ambulance to County General Hospital. She fainted during school assembly this morning. It's urgent that you call me back immediately or meet us at the hospital. She left her number and hung up, then immediately dialed again. Still voicemail. Next, she called Child Protective Services. The line was answered by a tired-sounding woman who identified herself as Intake Coordinator Davis. Sarah provided the details methodically, fighting to keep her voice professional, even as anger simmered beneath the surface. A 7-year-old child. No food for 5 days. Signs of ongoing neglect. Father unreachable. Mother apparently out of the picture. We'll send someone to the hospital, Davis said. Do you know if the child is in immediate danger? If returned to the home? I don't know enough yet to make that determination, Sarah admitted. But I know that she nearly died this morning from starvation. That feels like immediate danger to me. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I understand your concern, Miss Fletcher. We take these reports seriously. Someone will be there within the hour. Sarah grabbed her purse and keys, informed Principal Morrison she was leaving, and headed to her car. The drive to County General took 12 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. Her mind kept replaying the moment Sophia had collapsed, the way the child's body had simply given out, unable to sustain itself any longer on willpower alone. How had it gotten this bad? How had Sophia managed to function at school for 4 days without eating before her body finally shut down? The emergency room was busy when Sarah arrived, but she was directed to a treatment room in the pediatric area. Sophia lay on a hospital bed that seemed enormous around her small form, an IV already in place on her right arm. A doctor was listening to her heart with a stethoscope, while a nurse made notes on a tablet. "Nurse Fletcher?" the doctor said, straightening. He was in his 50s, with kind eyes and the air of someone who'd seen too much suffering. "I'm Dr. Harrison. The paramedics filled us in and we're running some tests now. Blood work, checking her electrolytes, liver and kidney function. We've started IV fluids, but we're being very careful about the rate. Refeeding syndrome is a real concern." "I know," Sarah said. "Has anyone been able to reach her father?" Dr. Harrison shook his head. "We've tried the number on file." "No answer. We've left multiple messages." His expression darkened. "When we do reach him, he's going to have some very serious questions to answer." "CPS is sending someone," Sarah informed him. "Good." Dr. Harrison's voice was grim. "Because this child shows signs of prolonged malnutrition, not just a few missed meals. Her weight is significantly below what it should be for her age and height. I'd estimate she's lost at least 8 to 10 pounds recently, which for a child her size is substantial. Her blood pressure is dangerously low. She's showing early signs of muscle wasting. This didn't happen over 5 days. This has been going on longer." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. "How much longer?" "Weeks at least, maybe months. The acute starvation, not eating for 5 days, that's what brought her system to the point of collapse. But the chronic malnutrition, that takes time to develop." Dr. Harrison looked at Sophia, who was dozing fitfully, exhausted from the morning's ordeal. Someone should have noticed. "We did notice," Sarah said, the guilt she'd been holding back flooding through her. Her teacher noticed she'd been quiet and withdrawn. It's in her file. There were attendance issues. But no one put it together. No one realized. Her voice cracked. "We failed her." "Hey," Dr. Harrison said gently. "You didn't fail her. You saved her. If she hadn't fainted today, if you hadn't been there to assess her properly and call 911, we might be having a very different conversation. Children are remarkably good at hiding pain and hunger, especially when they've been conditioned to believe they shouldn't ask for help." A commotion in the hallway drew their attention. Raised voices, someone demanding to know where his daughter was. Sarah and Dr. Harrison exchanged glances before stepping out of the treatment room. A man in his mid-30s stood at the nurse's station, his work clothes rumpled, his face a mix of anger and fear. Dark circles under his eyes suggested chronic sleep deprivation, and his hands shook slightly as he gripped the counter. "I'm Michael Chen. My daughter Sophia Chen was brought here. Where is she? What happened?" His words tumbled out in a rush, and Sarah could smell the faint scent of motor oil and desperation coming off him. "Mr. Chen, I'm Dr. Harrison. Your daughter is stable, but she's going to need to stay here for observation and treatment." The doctor's voice was professional but cool. "She collapsed at school this morning due to severe malnutrition and dehydration." The color drained from Michael Chen's face. "What?" "But she was fine this morning. She ... He trailed off, and something flickered in his eyes. Realization, perhaps, or guilt. "She said she wasn't hungry at breakfast." "Mr. Chen," Sarah stepped forward. "I'm Nurse Fletcher from Riverside Elementary. Sophia told me she hasn't eaten in 5 days. She said you've been working long hours and forgot to go shopping for food." Michael's mouth opened and closed several times, his expression cycling through shock, denial, and then devastating comprehension. 5 days? No, that can't be right. There's food at home. He stopped, his hands going to his head. Oh God. The pantry. I kept meaning to go to the store, but with the double shifts and the bills I thought there was enough. I didn't realize. You didn't realize your daughter wasn't eating? Dr. Harrison's voice held carefully controlled anger. Mr. Chen, your daughter is severely malnourished. This isn't just about missing a few meals. When was the last time you actually sat down and ate with her? When did you last check what food was in your house? Michael's knees seemed to buckle and he grabbed the counter for support. I've been so tired. Work has been demanding. The third shift, then picking up extra hours. I come home, and she's usually already asleep. In the mornings I leave before she wakes up. I thought she was eating at school, that she was okay. She wasn't eating at school, Mr. Chen. She's not on the free lunch program, and she told me she was too afraid to ask for help because you told her not to discuss family business with others. Sarah's voice shook with barely contained emotion. Your daughter has been starving, and she was too scared to tell anyone because she didn't want to get you in trouble. The devastation on Michael Chen's face was complete. His eyes filled with tears, and he seemed to age 10 years in the span of seconds. Can I see her? Please, I need to see my daughter. Dr. Harrison nodded toward the treatment room. She's resting. We've given her IV fluids and will begin very carefully reintroducing nutrition. But Mr. Chen, there are going to be some people who want to speak with you. Child Protective Services has been contacted. Michael's head snapped up, fresh fear replacing the grief. No, you can't take her from me. She's all I have left. After Lynn left, Sophia is everything. I know I messed up. I know I haven't been there enough, but I love my daughter. I would never intentionally hurt her. Intentional or not, a new voice said from behind them. Your daughter ended up in the hospital because she was starving. A woman in her 40s approached, carrying a badge and a briefcase. I'm Sandra Martinez with Child Protective Services. Mr. Chen, I need to speak with you about what happens next. Sarah watched as the color drained from Michael's face. In the treatment room, Sophia stirred, and Sarah felt torn between staying to witness this crucial conversation and being with the child who'd asked her to stay. She chose Sophia, slipping back into the room while voices rose and fell in the hallway. Sophia's eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first before landing on Sarah. You came back. I promised I would, Sarah said, taking the chair beside the bed and reaching for Sophia's hand. How are you feeling? Tired. And my arm hurts a little. Sophia glanced at the IV. They said I have to stay here for a while. Yes, the doctors need to make sure you're okay. They're going to give you some special food to help you get stronger. Sarah paused. Sophia, your dad is here. He's talking with some people in the hallway. Is he mad? The fear in Sophia's voice was heartbreaking. I didn't mean to make trouble. I tried to be good and not bother anyone. Oh, sweetheart. Sarah squeezed her hand gently. You didn't make trouble. You didn't do anything wrong at all. Do you understand that? None of this is your fault. Sophia's lower lip trembled. But Daddy works so hard. He's always tired. I didn't want to make things harder for him. Mommy left because things were hard, and I didn't want Daddy to leave too. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. A mother who'd left, a father drowning in work and responsibility, and a child so terrified of losing her remaining parent that she'd chosen to starve rather than risk being a burden. The tragedy of it settled over Sarah like a heavy blanket. Sophia, parents are supposed to take care of their children. It's a parent's job to make sure you have food and a safe place to sleep and everything you need. You're 7 years old. None of the grown-up stuff is your responsibility. Sarah kept her voice gentle but firm. And asking for food when you're hungry? That's not being a burden. That's being human. The treatment room door opened, and Michael Chen stood there, his face ravaged with tears. Behind him, Sandra Martinez watched carefully, along with a security guard. Daddy? Sophia's voice was small and uncertain, and the single word seemed to break something fundamental in Michael Chen. He took a stumbling step forward, then stopped as if afraid to come closer, as if he didn't deserve to be near his daughter after what had happened. Baby girl, he choked out. And then he was moving to the bedside, falling to his knees beside the hospital bed. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. His hands hovered over Sophia, wanting to touch her but seemingly afraid he'd break her more than he already had. Sophia reached out with her free hand, the one without the IV, and touched her father's hair. Don't cry, Daddy. I'm okay now. The doctors are helping me. The simple forgiveness in those words. The way this child was comforting her parent even after everything she'd endured, made several of the adults in the room look away. Sarah felt tears prick her own eyes as she watched the complicated dance of love and failure play out before her. You're not okay, Michael said, his voice breaking. You're in the hospital because I failed you. Because I wasn't paying attention. Because I was so caught up in trying to provide for us that I forgot the most basic thing, making sure you had food to eat. He finally let himself touch her, his hand gently cupping her pale cheek. How long, Sophie? How long have you been going to bed hungry? Sophia looked down at the blanket, picking at it with her fingers. I don't know. A while. There were crackers for a long time, but then they ran out, and the cereal ran out. I tried to make the peanut butter last, but then there wasn't any bread. Why didn't you tell me? Michael's anguish was palpable. Why didn't you say something? You were so tired all the time, Sophia whispered, and you'd come home and just sit on the couch and close your eyes. I heard you talking on the phone about bills and money. I didn't want to make things worse. I thought if I could just wait until you had time to go shopping, it would be okay. Sandra Martinez stepped forward, her expression carefully neutral, though her eyes held a deep sadness. Mr. Chen, we need to talk about the immediate situation. Your daughter is going to be here for at least a few days while she's medically stabilized. During that time, I need to conduct a full investigation into your home situation. Michael's hand tightened on Sophia's. Are you going to take her from me? That's not a decision I can make right now, Sandra said. What I can tell you is that Sophia's safety is our primary concern. We need to understand how this happened and make sure it doesn't happen again. She paused, her voice gentling slightly. I'm going to be honest with you, Mr. Chen. Cases of neglect, even when they're unintentional, require intervention. But I can also see that you love your daughter. So what happens next depends on a lot of factors, including your willingness to work with us. I'll do anything, Michael said immediately. I'll quit the extra shifts. I'll figure out the money some other way. Just please don't take her from me. She's all I have. That's actually part of the problem, isn't it? Sandra's voice was gentle but direct. You're all she has too. And when you're working 70, 80 hours a week, exhausted, barely functioning, there's no safety net. What happened to her mother, Mr. Chen? The question hung in the air. Sarah could see the way Sophia tensed, the way her small hand clutched tighter to her father's. This was clearly painful territory. Lynn left us, Michael said finally, his voice hollow. About 14 months ago. Things had been difficult for a while. We were arguing about money, about how much I was working, about everything really. One day I came home from work, and she was just gone. Her clothes, her things, all gone. She left a note saying she couldn't do it anymore, that she needed to find herself or some such thing. And you haven't heard from her since? She called a few times at first. She said she was in California, staying with a friend. But the calls got less frequent, and then they stopped. I tried to reach her when the divorce papers came, but she'd changed her number. Michael's voice was bitter now. She gave up her parental rights without a fight. Didn't even ask about Sophia. Just signed everything and disappeared. Sarah felt a pang of sympathy for both father and daughter. A mother who'd abandoned her family, a father struggling to hold everything together and failing, and a child caught in the middle, trying so hard not to be a burden that she'd nearly died. Mr. Chen, Sandra continued, pulling out a folder from her briefcase. I need to ask you some specific questions. When you're at work, who watches Sophia? She's in school during the day, Michael said. She gets home around 3:30 and lets herself in with her key. I usually get home by 6:30 if I'm on the early shift. And when you work late? Michael's face flushed with shame. She's alone. I know. I know it's not ideal, but I didn't have a choice. I can't afford childcare, and I don't have family in the area. My parents are in Oregon, and Lynn's family, well, they blamed me when she left. Said I drove her away with my working all the time. They don't want anything to do with us. So a 7-year-old child has been coming home to an empty house, responsible for feeding herself, putting herself to bed. Sandra's tone remained professional, but there was steel underneath. I left money for food, Michael protested weakly. I thought she could make herself sandwiches, heat up soup. I didn't realize. He looked at Sophia, confusion and horror mixing in his expression. Why didn't you make yourself food, baby? Why didn't you use the money I left? Sophia's voice was barely audible. There wasn't any money, Daddy. You stopped leaving it a few weeks ago. Michael's face went white. What? No, I always left $20 on the counter every Monday morning. But even as he said it, Sarah could see the doubt creeping into his eyes. The exhaustion, the fog of working too many hours, the possibility that in his depleted state, he'd simply forgotten. Daddy, Sophia said quietly, you haven't left money since before my birthday, Sophia's birthday. Sarah pulled out her phone and did a quick calculation. Sophia's birthday had been listed in her school file as August 15th. It was now October 22nd. 2 months. This child had been managing on whatever scraps existed in the house for 2 months, watching the supplies dwindle, too afraid or too conditioned not to ask for help. The reality of it seemed to crash over Michael like a wave. He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Sophia reached out and patted his head, this small, malnourished child comforting her father. And Sarah had to excuse herself from the room before she broke down completely. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall and took several deep breaths. Dr. Harrison found her there a moment later. Tough one, he said simply. They're all tough, Sarah replied. But this feels different. That's not a bad man in there. That's a man who's been drowning and didn't realize he was pulling his daughter under with him. Doesn't change what happened to that child, Dr. Harrison said, but his voice held more sadness than judgment. She's going to need a lot of medical care, possibly therapy. The physical recovery from malnutrition can take months. The psychological impact? He shook his head. That's harder to predict. Inside the room, Sandra Martinez was explaining the next steps to Michael Chen. I'm going to visit your home today, she said. I need to see the living conditions, verify what resources are available. I'll be speaking with your employer, your neighbors, Sophia's teachers. This is going to be a thorough investigation, Mr. Chen. I understand, Michael said, wiping his eyes. What? What happens to Sophia while you investigate? She'll remain here in the hospital for now. Once she's medically stable, we'll make a determination about placement. If we feel she can safely return home with appropriate safeguards in place, that's the preferable outcome. If not, Sandra paused, we'll look at temporary foster care while we work on a plan. Foster care? Michael's voice broke on the words. Please, you can't. She's been through so much already. Being away from me, in a stranger's home. Mr. Chen, your daughter has been essentially alone for months. Coming home to an empty house, no food, no supervision. At least in foster care, she'd be supervised and fed. Sandra's words were harsh, but true. Sophia had been listening to all of this, and now she spoke up, her voice carrying a strength that surprised everyone. I want to stay with my daddy. Every head turned toward her. I know he messed up, but he's my daddy, and he loves me. He was just tired and forgot. People forget things when they're tired. Mrs. Patterson says that all the time. Sophia, Sandra said gently, it's wonderful that you love your father. But love isn't always enough. You need someone who can take care of you properly. He will, Sophia insisted. Now that he knows. He didn't know I was hungry. If he knew, he would have fixed it. Right, Daddy? Michael looked at his daughter, this brave, loyal little girl who was defending him even after he'd failed her so completely. Right, he managed. If I had known, I would have done everything differently, Sandra sighed. We'll see, Sophia. That's all I can promise right now. We'll see. She turned back to Michael. I need contact information for your employer and the address of your apartment. I'll be conducting my site visit this afternoon. The next several hours were a blur of activity. Michael provided the information Sandra needed, then was reluctantly persuaded to go home, shower, and bring back some of Sophia's belongings. She'll want her stuffed animals, he said, his voice thick, and her favorite blanket. It's purple with stars. Sarah stayed with Sophia while the medical team ran more tests. Blood work revealed dangerously low levels of several essential nutrients, including iron, vitamin D, and B vitamins. Her liver enzymes were elevated, a sign of stress on the organ from prolonged malnutrition. An EKG showed some minor irregularities in her heart rhythm that Dr. Harrison wanted to monitor closely. We're going to start her on a very carefully controlled refeeding protocol, Dr. Harrison explained to Sarah, who'd been designated as Sophia's advocate since she was the familiar face. Small amounts of food every few hours, slowly increasing as her body adjusts. We'll monitor her electrolytes constantly. Refeeding syndrome is a real risk here. Her body has been in starvation mode, and suddenly flooding it with nutrients can actually be dangerous. How long will she need to be here? Minimum of 5 to 7 days, possibly longer depending on how she responds to treatment. Dr. Harrison looked through the window at Sophia, who was dozing again. She's going to need ongoing monitoring for months after discharge, growth tracking, nutritional counseling, possibly supplements, and that's just the physical side. Sarah nodded, understanding what he meant. The psychological impact of what Sophia had endured would need to be addressed as well. I'll make sure the school is prepared to support her when she returns. If she returns to that school, Dr. Harrison said quietly, depending on what CPS decides, she might end up somewhere else entirely. The thought made Sarah's chest tighten. Sophia needed stability, familiar faces, continuity, but she also needed safety and proper care. The tension between those needs was what made these cases so heartbreaking. That afternoon, Sandra Martinez arrived at the apartment building on Maple Street. It was an older building, not run down but showing signs of deferred maintenance. Paint peeling in places, a broken light in the hallway. Michael Chen's apartment was on the 3rd floor, number 3B. He let her in with the air of a man heading to his execution. The apartment was small, a 1-bedroom unit that had clearly been home to a struggling single parent. The living room held a sagging couch and a small TV. Toys were scattered in one corner, but they looked old, well-loved, but not recently played with. There were dishes in the sink, laundry piled on a chair, the general chaos of someone barely keeping their head above water. But it was the kitchen that told the real story. Sandra opened the refrigerator and found it nearly empty. A half-gallon of milk that smelled questionable, some condiments, a few eggs. The freezer held ice cubes and nothing else. The pantry was worse. Completely empty except for a can of green beans and a jar of expired pasta sauce. Mr. Chen, Sandra said, her voice carefully controlled. How long has your kitchen looked like this? Michael seemed to shrink. I don't know. I really don't know. I'd buy groceries, but they never seemed to last. I thought Sophia was eating them, that she was going through everything quickly. Kids do that, right? They grow and they eat a lot. His voice held desperate hope that Sandra might agree with him, but Sandra was thinking about a little girl carefully rationing whatever food existed, making crackers last as long as possible, finally running out of options entirely. Mr. Chen, show me where Sophia sleeps. The apartment only had 1 bedroom, and it clearly belonged to Sophia. A twin bed with a purple comforter, stuffed animals lined up carefully on the pillow, drawings taped to the walls. It was the room of a child whose parent cared, which made the empty kitchen even more tragic. Where do you sleep? Sandra asked. The couch, Michael admitted. I gave Sophia the bedroom after Lynn left. Seemed only right that she have a proper room. Sandra opened the small closet. Sophia's clothes hung there, organized by type. School uniforms, play clothes, a winter jacket that looked too small. On the shelf above, Sandra found a box. Inside were drawings, dozens of them. Pictures of a family, a mother and father and daughter, all smiling. Pictures of food, elaborate meals drawn in crayon, pictures of a little girl alone in rooms. She's been trying to tell someone, Sandra said softly. Through her art. Did you ever look at these? Michael took the box with trembling hands, shuffling through the drawings. His face crumpled as he saw what his daughter had been expressing. The loneliness, the hunger, the fear, all captured in childish drawings that he'd never bothered to really look at. I thought they were just kids' stuff. I didn't understand. Sandra spent 2 more hours in the apartment, documenting everything, taking photos, writing notes, building the case file that would determine Sophia's future. She spoke with neighbors, who confirmed that they'd seen Sophia coming home from school alone, noticed that she looked thinner recently, heard her crying sometimes at night. But no one had called anyone. Everyone assumed someone else was handling it, that a parent knew what they were doing. Back at the hospital, evening had fallen. Sophia had been given her first small meal, a carefully measured portion of bland foods designed to be easy on her system. She'd eaten slowly, savoring every bite, tears streaming down her face at the simple act of having food. Sarah had stayed past the end of her shift, unable to leave Sophia alone. They'd talked about school, about Sophia's favorite subjects, reading and art, about the friends she sometimes played with at recess. Sophia was bright, curious, articulate when she felt safe, the child she was meant to be showed through in those moments. When Michael returned with a bag of Sophia's belongings, he looked worse than he had that morning. The visit from CPS had clearly shaken him to his core. But he sat beside his daughter's bed, held her hand, and told her about his day at work, trying to provide some sense of normalcy. Sandra arrived around 7 p.m., her expression giving nothing away. She asked to speak with Michael outside the room. Sarah stayed with Sophia, who gripped her stuffed bear tightly, fear evident in her eyes. "Mr. Chen," Sandra began, "I've completed my initial investigation. I've seen your home, spoken with your neighbors, and your employer." She paused. "Your boss, Mr. Hendricks, had some interesting things to say. He confirmed you've been working extreme hours. But he also said something else. He said he's been trying to get you to take time off for months. That you've been turning down vacation days, refusing to reduce your hours even when he suggested it." Michael's face flushed. "I needed the money. The bills. Mr. Hendricks said you've been sending money somewhere. Regular transfers every month, large amounts that don't align with your known expenses." Sandra's eyes were sharp. "Where is that money going, Mr. Chen?" For a long moment, Michael said nothing. Then, so quietly, Sandra almost missed it. "To Lynn. To my ex-wife." The confession hung in the air between them. "Why?" Sandra asked, though she was beginning to piece it together. "She calls sometimes," Michael said, his voice hollow. "Not often, but sometimes. And she says she's struggling, that she needs help getting back on her feet. She says once she's stable, she'll come back, she'll be part of Sophia's life again. So I send her money. I've been sending her money every month, hoping that if I help her enough, if I show her we're still a family, she'll come home. While your daughter starved." Sandra's voice was like ice. "I didn't know Sophie was going hungry." Michael's voice rose in anguish. "I thought I was managing everything. I thought if I just worked harder, earned more, I could make it all work. I could pay the bills, help Lynn, take care of Sophia. I didn't realize I was failing at the most basic thing." "You were being manipulated," Sandra said, and there was a hint of sympathy in her voice now. "Your ex-wife abandoned her family, and then convinced you to bankrupt yourself supporting her while she was gone, dangling the possibility of return like a carrot. Meanwhile, your daughter was alone and starving." Michael slumped against the wall. "I've been such a fool." "Yes," Sandra agreed bluntly. "But the question now is what we do moving forward. I've made some calls. There are resources available, Mr. Chen. Programs for single parents, food assistance, counseling services, but you have to want to use them. You have to be willing to accept help." "I'll do anything," Michael said. "I'll sign up for every program you have. I'll quit the extra shifts. I'll stop sending Lynn money. I'll do whatever it takes to get my daughter back and keep her safe. Sandra nodded slowly. Here's what's going to happen. Sophia will remain hospitalized until she's medically cleared. That gives us time to set some things in place. You're going to meet with a social worker who specializes in family reunification. You're going to apply for every assistance program you qualify for. You're going to reduce your work hours to something sustainable. And you're going to attend parenting classes. Parenting classes? Michael looked stung. Yes, because clearly what you've been doing isn't working. Sandra's voice was firm but not unkind. You love your daughter. I can see that. But love isn't enough when a child ends up in the hospital from starvation. You need to learn how to prioritize, how to ask for help, how to recognize when something is wrong. These classes will help. And then Sophia can come home? If you complete everything I've outlined, if the home inspection shows appropriate food and safety measures, and if Sophia's medical team feels she's ready, then yes. But there will be conditions. Regular visits from a social worker, continued monitoring, one slip-up, Mr. Chen, and we'll have to reconsider placement. Do you understand? I understand, Michael said, and for the first time since this nightmare began, there was something like hope in his voice. Thank you. Thank you for giving us a chance. Sandra's expression softened slightly. I'm not doing this for you, Mr. Chen. I'm doing it for Sophia. That little girl in there deserves a parent who puts her first, who sees her, who makes sure her basic needs are met before anything else. Can you be that parent? I can, Michael said, and this time his voice was steady. I will be. Over the next 6 days, Sophia remained in the hospital. Her body slowly adjusted to regular nutrition, though the process was delicate and monitored constantly. She gained 2 pounds, a small but significant improvement. The color returned to her cheeks. The bluish tint to her lips faded. Her energy levels improved, though she still tired easily. Sarah visited every day after work, bringing books and puzzles, sitting with Sophia for hours. She watched as the child slowly opened up, talking more freely about her experiences, her fears, her hopes. Sophia drew pictures, including one of her and her father together, smiling, with a table full of food between them. Michael kept every promise he'd made. He met with the social worker, a kind woman named Patricia, who'd seen hundreds of families in crisis. He applied for state food assistance and was approved. He reduced his hours at work, much to his boss's relief. Mr. Hendricks had been worried about Michael for months but hadn't known how to intervene. The parenting classes were harder for Michael than he'd expected. Sitting in a room with other struggling parents, admitting his failures, learning basic things about child development and needs that he should have known. But he went to every session, took notes, asked questions. He was determined to be better, to be the father Sophia deserved. On the 5th day, a phone call came, Lynn's number. Michael stared at it for a long moment before answering. Hello? Michael? I haven't heard from you in a while. Did you forget the transfer this month? Lynn's voice was casual, entitled, as if she had every right to expect his money. Yeah, Michael said, his voice cold in a way it had never been with her before. I forgot. Because I've been at the hospital with our daughter. The daughter you abandoned. The daughter who almost died because I was too busy working to send you money to notice she was starving. Silence on the other end. Then, what are you talking about? Sophia collapsed at school from malnutrition. She hadn't eaten in 5 days because I'd forgotten to buy groceries. Because I was working 80-hour weeks to pay bills and send you money every month. Money you've been using while your daughter went hungry. That's not my fault, Lynn said, defensive now. I didn't ask you to neglect her. No, you just asked me to neglect everything else to support you while you found yourself. Well, I'm done, Lynn. I'm done sending money. I'm done waiting for you to come back. I'm done pretending you're ever going to be a mother to Sophia again. The divorce is final. You signed away your parental rights, and as far as I'm concerned, you can stay in California forever. Michael, don't be ridiculous. You need me. No, Michael said, and for the first time in over a year, he felt clear-headed. I don't. Sophia doesn't. We needed you once, but you chose to leave. That was your decision. Mine is to stop letting you hurt us from a distance. Don't call again. He hung up. blocked her number, and felt something lift from his shoulders. The weight of false hope, of desperately trying to fix something that had been broken beyond repair. Lynn wasn't coming back, and even if she did, she wasn't the person he and Sophia needed. On day 6, Dr. Harrison gave Sophia medical clearance to leave the hospital. Her weight had stabilized, her blood work showed improvement, and her vital signs were strong. She'll need regular follow-ups, he told Michael. Weekly for the first month, then monthly. She'll be on vitamin supplements for at least 6 months, and she needs to eat small, frequent meals. Her stomach has shrunk from the malnutrition, so large meals will make her uncomfortable. I understand, Michael said, and he had a notebook where he'd written down every instruction, every recommendation, determined not to forget anything ever again. Sandra conducted her final home inspection that afternoon. The apartment had been transformed. The refrigerator was full of healthy foods, fruits and vegetables, milk and cheese, proteins. The pantry held staples, rice and pasta and canned goods, organized neatly. There was a meal plan on the refrigerator, simple but nutritious. A schedule showing Michael's reduced work hours. A list of emergency contacts including Sandra's number, Patricia, the social worker's number, and Sarah's school number. This is good, Sandra said, and she almost smiled. This is what I needed to see. Sophia can come home under supervision. I'll be checking in weekly for the first month, then bi-weekly. Patricia will continue working with you, and Sarah Fletcher at the school has been briefed on the situation. She'll be keeping a close eye on Sophia. When they brought Sophia home from the hospital, she paused in the doorway, looking around as if seeing the apartment with new eyes. Michael knelt down to her level. Welcome home, baby girl. I know things have been hard, but they're going to be different now. I promise you. I'm going to be here more. I'm going to make sure you always have food. I'm going to be the dad you deserve. Sophia hugged him tightly. I missed home. I missed you, Michael said. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. I know, Daddy. Sophia pulled back and looked at him seriously, with wisdom beyond her years. Mrs. Martinez says everyone makes mistakes. What matters is fixing them. That evening, Michael cooked dinner. Nothing fancy, just spaghetti with marinara sauce and a side of steamed broccoli. But he and Sophia sat at the small kitchen table together, and they ate slowly, talking about their day. It was the first real meal they'd shared in months. After dinner, Michael helped Sophia with her homework. He'd arranged with his boss to work day shifts only, no more nights, no more weekends unless absolutely necessary. It meant less money, but with the assistance programs, they'd manage. More importantly, it meant he'd be present, really present, in his daughter's life. As he tucked Sophia into bed that night, she clutched her stuffed bear and looked up at him. Daddy, are you going to be here when I wake up? The question broke his heart. Yes, baby. I'll be here. I'll make you breakfast before school, and I'll pick you up after school. Every day. Promise? I promise. And this time, Michael intended to keep his promises. All of them. 3 weeks later, Sarah Fletcher received an email from Mrs. Patterson. Sophia Chen had returned to school. The other children had welcomed her back with cards they'd made during her absence. Sophia was participating in class again, raising her hand to answer questions, smiling during story time. She ate lunch in the cafeteria now, enrolled in the free lunch program without shame. And every afternoon at 3:30, Michael Chen was waiting at the school pickup area, ready to take his daughter home. Sarah printed out the email and added it to the file she'd been keeping. Not an official file, just a personal one, documenting a case that had touched her deeply. She added a photo that Sophia had drawn and given to her, a picture of the school nurse with a heart around her, and the words, "Thank you for saving me," written in careful second-grade handwriting. Not every story had a happy ending. Sarah knew that from years of experience. Some children she tried to help ended up in worse situations. Some families couldn't be repaired no matter how many resources were thrown at them. But sometimes, just sometimes, a wake-up call came at exactly the right moment. A child collapsed at exactly the right time, in front of exactly the right people, and everything that needed to happen to save that child fell into place like dominoes, Sophia Chen had fainted during morning assembly because her body had finally given up after 5 days without food. But that fainting had saved her life. It had exposed a crisis that might otherwise have continued until it was too late. It had forced a system to respond, a father to face his failures, a community to rally around a child in need. 6 months after that Tuesday morning in the gymnasium, Sarah ran into Michael and Sophia at the grocery store. Sophia's cart was full of healthy foods, and the little girl was animated, chatting about a science project she was excited about. Michael looked different too, less exhausted, more present. When he saw Sarah, he stopped and shook her hand. "I never properly thanked you," he said. "If you hadn't made that call, if you hadn't taken Sophia seriously and acted quickly, I don't know if she'd be here today." "I'm just glad I was there when she needed help," Sarah said. Then to Sophia, "How are you doing, sweetie?" "Really good," Sophia said, and her smile was bright and genuine. "I'm in a cooking class with my dad. We're learning to make healthy meals together. Last week we made chicken stir-fry." "That sounds wonderful," Sarah said, and she meant it. As she watched them walk away, Sophia's hand in her father's, their cart full of food, Sarah felt the particular satisfaction that came from knowing she'd made a difference. It wasn't always about grand gestures or dramatic saves. Sometimes it was just about being present, paying attention, and caring enough to act when a child needed help. The gymnasium at Riverside Elementary still held morning assemblies every Tuesday. Children still sat in rows on the polished floor, still whispered and fidgeted, and listened to Principal Morrison's announcements. But now, among the staff, there was a heightened awareness. Teachers watched more carefully for signs of trouble. The school had implemented a breakfast program, making sure no child went hungry. And Sarah Fletcher kept a closer eye on all her students, looking for the subtle signs that a child might be struggling at home, because she'd learned that sometimes the quietest children were the ones who needed help the most. The ones who didn't complain, didn't cause trouble, didn't ask for help because they'd learned that asking meant burdening others. Those were the children most at risk of slipping through the cracks. But not on Sarah's watch. Never again. In the end, that Tuesday morning had changed multiple lives. It had changed Sophia, who'd learned that asking for help wasn't weakness, but survival. It had changed Michael, who'd learned that being a parent meant more than just working hard. It meant being present and prioritizing what truly mattered. It had changed the school, which had implemented new protocols for identifying at-risk students. And it had changed Sarah, who approached her job with renewed purpose. The little girl who'd fainted during assembly had become a catalyst for change. Her suffering, while tragic, had not been in vain. It had opened eyes, prompted action, and ultimately saved not just one life, but potentially many others who might face similar struggles in the future. And on quiet mornings, when Sarah arrived at school early and walked through the empty gymnasium, she sometimes paused and remembered that Tuesday when everything changed. She remembered the small, crumpled form on the floor, the weak pulse, the devastating revelation that a child had been starving in plain sight. And she renewed her commitment to never let it happen again, to be vigilant, to care, to act, because every child deserved to be seen. Every child deserved to be fed. Every child deserved to be safe. And if Sarah Fletcher had anything to say about it, every child who walked through the doors of Riverside Elementary would be all three of those things. Or she'd move heaven and earth trying to make it so. The story could have ended in tragedy. Instead, it ended in hope. A father and daughter rebuilding their relationship, learning to communicate, creating new memories around dinner tables filled with food and conversation. A school community more aware and responsive to the needs of struggling families. A system that, while imperfect, had worked when it needed to most. And a little girl named Sophia Chen, who'd learned that she was worth fighting for, that her needs mattered, and that sometimes the bravest thing a person could do was admit they needed help. She still carried the psychological scars of those months of neglect, still had nightmares sometimes about being hungry and alone. But she was healing, growing stronger both physically and emotionally, surrounded by people who cared about her well-being. That was what mattered in the end. Not the mistakes that had been made, but the corrections that followed. Not the fall, but the getting back up. Not the fainting in the gymnasium, but the rising again, healthier and more supported than before. The morning assembly had been interrupted by a crisis, but from that crisis had come awareness, action, and ultimately, redemption. And that, Sarah reflected as she went about her day checking on students and making sure everyone was healthy and safe, was exactly how it should be. Problems identified, addressed, and resolved, with a child's well-being always at the center of every decision. Sophia Chen had fainted during morning assembly, but she'd risen again, stronger and more loved than ever. And that was the story that Sarah Fletcher would carry with her for the rest of her career, a reminder of why her work mattered and what was possible when people cared enough to act.